we're going to start without him. We can start, and I'm sure he'll be here momentarily. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Roseanne, you want to call the roll?
Yes, we can.
Mayor Halpin,
Here.
Vice Mayor Tudor. He informed that he has a previous commitment, so he will not be able to attend today. Commissioner Kennedy.
Here.
Commissioner Samaria.
Here.
Thank you.
Will everybody please rise, and Dan will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dan.
My pleasure. One of these days you can
Public comments are next. Please try to observe the 3-minute rule, and Roseanne will raise her hand when you have 10 seconds left and try to wrap up what you're doing. So you can just line up or however you choose to start.
Okay.
No
Harveyville, 450 Northeast 121st Street.
Speak up, please.
A couple of things. I've read the charter
Fix the
amendments and-
microphone.
fix the microphone. I can't hear you.
Oh. Yes? No?
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Oh, I'm too tall. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you. Good. Okay. I've read the amendments to the charter, and most of them really, in my opinion, do not make any sense. We do not have enough people that are running for office that we want to restrict voting for a mayor and then commissioners. To me, that part doesn't make any sense. Also, a term limit. We've had people that have served on the commission, like Bob, 20 years. If we had an unbelievably number of people available, I would say, great, that's fine. But we don't. There are a couple of small changes that I think need to be made as far as the certification, when the swearing in has to be, things like that would be fine. Two things I thought about, and Rosada said to me, we've taken care of it, is the elections, the 14th. We need to have a date certain then for the swearing in. And we could actually do it 2 days later. It does not have to be at a commission meeting. The other item was for the attorney. Last time, as he walks in, last time John Herron was our attorney. He knew our budget was approximately $75,000, and he said he would try work within that budget. So we didn't go overboard as we did with the last attorney that we had. Thank you. I get a candy?
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't take a candy. I'm on my way to exercise class. Anyways, Judy Hamelberg, 1015 Northeast 116th Street. I want to congratulate everybody on their new offices. I want to thank our Public Works manager for taking over and stepping in and helping us. And I hope some of the pressure is off of all of our employees, because we are a lovely place to live and we love our employees. I need to get back to baking brownies for Public Works again. Anyways, I will mimic what Harvey said. I don't think we need to have a strong mayor. We had a strong mayor. It was a hardship on the mayor. Richard Eder was a mayor for many years here, and luckily at that point he was not working full-time because of medical issues, but it was a lot of time and effort. I think having it the way it is now is better. I also like the idea of the mayor being elected by the commission rather than who's going to run for mayor. As you see, we don't get a tremendous amount of people. I think term limits are ridiculous. Bob Anderson was on this commission for probably 25 years, and he was a wonderful asset. So I really think we need to rethink what they have done and under which guise it was done under, and maybe revisit it later. I'd also like to see the thing about the magistrate held as when we have issues that can't be resolved, and I'd love to see the committee that used to take care of the code compliance be put back in shape. I think most of them would like to go back to doing their jobs, even though it was not an easy job to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. Just to ditto on the last few comments about the changes. Strong mayor doesn't make sense here. Term limits. You've been here a couple weeks. We have people here a couple years. We're lucky if you stay. Thank you. Please stay. I don't think we need term limits here. And if the voters want to keep you and you want to stay, we lose an awful lot of institutional knowledge as well when people leave who have like Bob Rocks, who, we had people who were here who aren't here anymore who really brought a lot of things to good light. The other thing on there about the about the village manager, I do think that the village manager, it's hard to attract good staff. I've been on the last 2 selection committees. Taking away any form of due process from that person, to me, doesn't make sense. So I don't know. There are other things in that document that are redlined that maybe should be explained. There wasn't any explanation in the report as to why those changes were offered up. I don't know if those will be made tonight, but it would be nice to hear why they thought those changes needed to be made. And finally, on that issue, I think that I don't know if there's a cost to us besides the attorney's time to review all these things, but it costs to put that on the ballot and to do all those. So maybe we don't need those changes as of this time. Maybe that's something down the line. The ordinance about board members who have left and want to come back, I think that's great. I would like to know if anybody can explain to me why that existed to begin with. Was there an issue or some kind of problem? And then finally, we had, from what I hear, years ago, we had a very active civic club in the village. And we've been talking about this on Nextdoor probably for a year on and off. I've talked to some of the commission candidates about it. We would like to kick that off again. And I've talked to people. We probably have about 24 people who are interested in participating in a civic club. I'd like to see if we could get the use of the rec center for a day in March that was decided upon by a poll of the residents as to what would be a good day and what's available for the staff at Parks and Recreation. Whoever has the availability for us to be able to use the rec center for a weekend day or night or an evening or however that might work out sometime in March. And ask the commission to be able to waive the fee for that. So I would just like to offer that and see if anybody would like to take me up on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to talk?
Barbara Kuehl, 111th Street, and I agree with everything everybody just said, so I won't repeat it. You're going to be talking about Ordinance 2019-05, the code about the Code Compliance Board, or the magistrate. The Code Compliance Board worked well for years. You had an ordinance that seemed to work well. There really weren't any problems, and you can always go back to that. And as far as occasionally, or somebody saying needing a magistrate, what used to happen in the past, if there was a particularly difficult situation, our attorney would be called in to advise, and it's simple. Again, charter review recommendations, I'm not in favor of them, but all the reasons that people said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Keys, since you were on...
Afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. Dan Keys. Looking at the entirety of the document, I don't believe any in terms of the charter stuff. I don't think really any of the proposals are absolutely necessary unless our attorney advises otherwise. There were 2 or 3 issues there that legal issues were alleged as problematic in our charter, and some of the changes were proposed because of those legal issues, assumed legal issues. So, whether the process of actually going through item by item to see whether there is any legal issues with it staying the way it is or going to the way it's been proposed is I think that it might be a good exercise. Doesn't have to be slow. Can be relatively quickly done, but if if we think we're prepared for that tonight, then I think it would be worthwhile. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Good evening, Rox Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. First of all, congratulations to all of you. It was a really difficult night last week.
Thank you.
You got a lot of really tough things done, and I was very proud to see them get accomplished. You handled it well. On today's agenda, the issue about the village attorney's engagement letter, I would like to see that done through a draft and adopt a resolution so that that resolution gets posted to the website and it becomes easily accessible for people to understand the terms of your engagement. It's usually how we've been handling contracts so that it becomes more transparent. With regard to the village manager, I'm glad that we have David Hernandez to usher us through this process. And in the event that that becomes, that the current manager is terminated, I think that if there's any negotiation that happens, it should include a debriefing of status of different things, perhaps with our village attorney. And it should also include mutual no disparagement agreement with that. Regarding the elections, there seems to be a missing, in the first and second paragraph, it talks about a November. The election was on November 2016. That date was, I believe, November 6th. Do you want to include that in the resolution? Just to make the form read properly. And with regard to the charter changes recommended, the one that I think is really imperative that we keep is the process for removal of a charter officer. We need to be able to give the manager cover, protect the manager, a professional manager, so that after an election, 3 people don't get elected and can just dispense with him at the next meeting. And even though the process may not be followed through that resolution reading the charges, which, by the way, I think you should read all of the charges that were in the resolution against the manager. But the opportunity to have that read and the opportunity for the manager to come back, giving him that due process, I think is important to make sure that we cover a strong manager who maybe has to go against a rogue commissioner, as we've seen of recent. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Ed Chisholm, 625 Northeast 114th Street. Last week, the village attorneys advised the commission not to proceed with the proposal to remove the village manager. The commission ignored the legal advice and proceeded with their vote. This decision has probably opened the village to lawsuits that could conceivably bankrupt the village. No one elected you to ignore good legal advice and proceed with an agenda that puts the village in jeopardy. I have personally been walking around the village and asking residents of the village if they agreed with your decision. It rapidly became apparent to me that the residents feel you acted irresponsibly and not in their best interest. I have the names of the people I was able to contact that feel this way. This is just a very small chunk of the park. One resident said she was embarrassed to live here. She should not be embarrassed by the village commissioners who voted this removal from office scenario. Should be. The village has rules. One of the rules is that the commissioners must be residents. I submit that living in your car in an abandoned or boarded up building should not qualify as a resident living. Perhaps the rules should be changed to say that all commissioners must be a tax-paying resident with no arrears or taxes or mortgage payments. A renter should not qualify as a resident for the purposes of being a village commissioner. Like a doctor, a commissioner's first obligation must be to do no harm. I think this commission has done what may become not only measurable, but irreparable harm. Swallow your pride Try to halt the damage onslaught. Extend a written apology to Mr. Manners and reinstate him before your decisions come back to bite us all.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to speak?
Here is a copy of all the people that
I need it because I need your name, please, sir. Do you have your name? Okay, thank you.
Roseanne, is this on? Are you guys hearing me? Can I get a copy of that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Chuck Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. I would like to know if those people on the list know all the facts. I doubt that they do. That the manager committed insubordination, gross insubordination, trying to remove a sitting commissioner. Apparently there was some remarks that are absolutely wrong about the residency status of one of the commissioners that I just heard. So, misinformed people, in my mind. As far as the charter review, that board was, I think the way the things that they proposed are not necessary, as other people stated before me. So I would, is that me? That's all. And the last thing I would say is that the, sorry about that. Well, I lost my train of thought. My phone's ringing. No, as far as the charter changes, there were a couple of things that probably need to be made, but I don't think they rise to the level of a ballot amendment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Fred Jonas, 918 119th Street. I want to just say one slightly different thing about the charter issues, and it seemed to me Chuck almost stumbled on it, but then he talked about some of the particulars, and I could talk about them too, but my problem with the charter issue is that the whole setup of the review board, in my opinion, was faulty. I just think it's entirely unreliable, and it's not fair to say that we shouldn't ever review the charter. We should. We are required to do it, and it's a good idea. But we need a proper board appointed to do that, and I'd be very happy to have you all take it upon yourselves to ignore everything you got from the recent charter review board and just appoint a new board so we can get a reasonable review. Regarding the magistrate issue, a few people have brought this up, and the thing that just keeps coming back is the concept of if it ain't broke. Really, that's just, I think, where we are. It's kind of hard to find a problem in what we're doing, and I will say that I had questions about it, I had concerns about it, but the problem is the lack of problem is that it just worked fine. So I really don't know what we're trying to fix. The only other thing is I would echo some of what Chuck just said and point out that when people are asked to comment about something, but they either don't know what they're commenting about or they're given a faulty premise, then it becomes very discouraging to find out what's on their mind, because it's just not connected to the actual events and the actual reality.
Thank you. Okay, public comments are over. Commissioner Samari, do you have anything to say?
No, I was going to comment on it. The only thing I'm just going to comment is that for the residents, that one of the problems that I had last month was, and I was concerned that was the way we handled the suspension of this Christian. I agreed with everything that was done. I think what we should have done was had a discussion and we could have brought all of that out. But if Christian city manager decides he wants to appeal, he will have his hearing, and in the public hearing, all the comments, all the allegations against him will be brought out, and he will be able to defend himself if he so decides to do it. I didn't comment at the last meeting because a lot of it, and I know one of the residents didn't mention me by name, and I appreciate it, but it was about me questioning my residency. There is a lot, and it will come out in the future, of what happened. And once that comes out, then you'll understand why it was done. the city manager had no authorization to file a lawsuit without going through the commission. That's all I'm going to comment about that.
Thank you. Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes, I'd like to say a couple of things about public comment. First of all, I appreciate everyone always coming and making comment. David Raymond talked about the Civic Club and using the rec center. Can we have a conversation about that now and perhaps decide on something or put that later in the meeting? Because I think that merits a discussion.
He's got to get a date and then come back to ask.
Did you not have a date? I thought you had a date.
No.
Okay. Do we have to, does he have to have an actual date? Okay.
Can I suggest something? If you could send me plus or minus dates so I could work with what we're doing over there at the rec center, and then we could come up with a date and we could figure it out.
Considering that he has a date that he wants to do in March and we don't have another meeting until March 3rd, might we decide in principle that we would agree to let them use the rec center pending him getting a date to David Hernandez that works for him? Yeah. And my opinion on this is we have some lovely facilities in this village, and I think residents should be allowed to use them.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, so...
I know we went out of sync. If you can just add out additions and deletions. I like to.
Well, there's no additions and deletions on here because it's a special meeting, I suppose. Can we discuss it right now? Is that okay?
I agree.
I believe the clerk is going to advise you that, as I understand it, when you call a special call meeting, it's for specific items that have been previously announced, and therefore it would have to roll over to another meeting.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Can I make a motion that we change the rules about special meetings? Okay.
No.
Then let's talk about that in March because I feel kind of strongly about that. My goodness, he's trying to start a civic club.
Put
That's
that
a great
on the
thing.
agenda.
Yeah. Okay.
And a consideration for a waiver of the.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we would discuss waiving fees and things like that. I do want to, saying all sides of this, when groups requested that before, and I was involved in a group that requested it and was denied, and we ended up paying for it, we were told there were liability concerns. So, John, you might want to be prepared to address that with us on March 3rd when we bring the matter up again. And they sounded kind of legitimate when people were saying them, so we should make sure we have all of that covered as well. Rox brought up a couple of things that I'd like to discuss real quickly. The attorney has a draft and adopt resolution. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure what that means, but it sounded really important. So is that something we should do?
Well, I think to the point that was being made is that historically, when you have a contract or agreement, there's a resolution that goes along with it. So there's a record of it. To the extent that you all or this commission authorizes the mayor or the interim manager to sign the engagement letter with Fox Rothschild, we can always bring the letter, the executed engagement letter, with a resolution at the next meeting to ratify that document. So there's that record keeping. Alternatively, it is being discussed, and it will be part of the public record because it's in the agenda. But it's at your discretion. I understand the idea behind it, and if you want a better, potentially more transparent process, then it can be done by resolution, and that will always be on the. I think the point that's trying to be made is that it will then always be on the village's website.
I was going to make a motion to make a resolution approving the contract.
Okay.
That's the next item.
Assuming you approve the engagement letter, then what I will do is I'll work with the clerk to draft a resolution ratifying the engagement letter for the next agenda.
I would like a copy of the petition that the gentleman brought in this evening. And I'm sorry I didn't catch his name, and I haven't not met you, so I can't address you by name.
It's a list of
okay, so if I can get a copy of that, I would like to see that. Actually, he went to some trouble to get these names, and I'd like to see that. And Rox also mentioned that if there's any negotiation or conversation to take place with the suspended village manager, that a debriefing might be appropriate, and I agree with that as well. So it's something we could discuss then.
Certainly.
you and I had a short
Yeah,
conversation
well,
about that today as well. so.
If it's the will of the commission, the manager and I will reach out to Mr. Manners to try and find out where
Where is that?
What he's doing.
where the issue may be headed and report back to you all certainly at the next commission meeting. If he elects to request a hearing, then obviously that will be also placed on the agenda. But we will reach out to him in the interim and get back with each of you.
Okay. You're next on the new business, the interim village attorney. Now, do you want a motion to do a resolution, or?
No.
Well, what I would suggest for purposes of formalizing the engagement is to I authorize the commission authorized the mayor to execute the engagement letter, so there is a formal relationship, and we will then bring it back at the next meeting as a consent item to approve the resolution ratifying the engagement letter.
Okay, do I make a motion for that? Or is that necessary, or?
No, it would be a promotion for you all.
Can I ask some questions about it beforehand, or does that come after?
After. Okay, I make a motion that we draft a resolution.
You can't make it.
I believe your rules are that unless you cede the gavel to someone else, another commission member has to make the agenda, at least for purpose of discussion.
To pass the gavel?
Yes.
Pass the gavel to one of your commissioners so they can make.
All right, now you can make the motion.
Now you can make the motion.
I make a motion that we submit a resolution approving our village attorney and his contract. Do we have a second on that?
Yeah.
Okay, now discussion.
John, the proposal that you gave us, how is it different than the proposal you gave us when you first left Gray Robinson and went to Fox Rothschild and came in here and auditioned for the job?
None. The terms of the engagement letter are virtually identical. I really didn't, but I instructed my assistant to pull the previous one and just update it. I think that when I made, or my firm made the presentation to the then commission regarding whether or not to stay with Gray Robinson or migrate over to my new law firm, there was some discussion that we would meet terms and conditions that previous had been approved to, which is we will abide by your budget. We have to work within your budget, and during the course of the year, or let me rephrase that, during the course of the time that I am your interim village attorney, if there is something that comes to my attention that is certainly appropriate for me to communicate to you all that on an issue that may throw out of whack the budget, I certainly would advise you. And I think that was my comment to the commission at the time to that effect, because I think there was a question that was asked by Commissioner Samaria about the FEMA appeal. And I responded that I would have advised you all, if I were your attorney, what those costs would be prior to embarking upon that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. And one of the specific things was in your in the letter, there's a section about about if you use another attorney, and I think you meant outside the firm, that it could possibly be at a higher rate. And I want to make sure that we would be notified about that, because it very clearly states kind of the rates within your firm.
No,
your particular rate.
What we would, and I've already received approval, is that we would use for all work performed by my firm on behalf of the village, we would charge a blended rate of $225.
So for all the work, because I read it to say that it said your rate, it said John Herron rate, and it gave that number, and I wanted to make sure that applies to everybody you would use.
Yes.
Even if you had to get outside counsel?
Well,
Or would that be something else you would come to us
counsel,
for?
Outside counsel is outside my law firm.
Okay, so then but you would come to us before you would get
Absolutely.
contract with anyone on our behalf. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not going to get any surprises in legal bills. I feel like I'm seeing legal bills that are already out of whack, and I want to make sure we're not jumping into another one of those situations. There's a section in there about using TLS protocol for transferring encrypted information. Do we do that? It sounded kind of important in it sounded like it was important to you.
Yeah,
to protect us.
My law firm is very keen on the idea of electronic security, not only for the benefit of clients such as the Village of Biscayne Park, but other clients of ours that actually require us to have an elevated security as a condition of doing the work for those clients, because they view their documents or information sometimes proprietary nature, which obviously doesn't necessarily apply here because of the records law. So we do have that enhanced, and when we want to disclose that to all of our clients and prospective clients, that our transmissions to you all comply with that protocol. Right. It doesn't mean that yours don't, but to the extent that they come to us and we respond, we're using those protocols.
You're protecting them the same way.
That is correct.
Great. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, the next item is a motion.
We didn't vote on that.
What about me?
So,
Oh, I'm sorry. You want to speak to that?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Just so so I'm clear, that the motion is to authorize.
A resolution.
The engagement.
The engagement, and we will bring back a resolution ratifying the engagement letter at the next meeting. But the engagement letter will be executed tonight or tomorrow, as the case may be, so we have the engagement in place formally. Is that?
You're locked in.
Okay.
Commissioner Samari?
Yeah, some of the concerns that we had with the last attorney that I need to bring up in reference to billing. Is your law firm going to be able to do an in-depth billing more? An example, as a lot of law firms do, let's say 145 to 245 met with Commissioner Samari. We need to have a better breakdown of the billing. I don't want to have 3 items tied up to 1 item.
I can tell you that from my personal billing style is to put an appropriate amount of detail so that any individual, lawyer or otherwise, will have an idea of what it is that the client is being billed for by just looking at the invoice. If there's a need for further explanation at any point, if there's a need at any point for additional explanation, I certainly will provide that. If you receive an invoice from my firm that you have a question about, that it's not a sufficient explanation, you just reach out to me, and I will provide the entire commission and staff and the manager a more in-depth explanation if that becomes necessary. But my goal is to be as descriptive as possible within reason, that any person will be able to read the invoice and have a basic understanding of the work that I performed, and not do what I think you're calling is block billing and just lumping things together. So I generally break them out with a parenthetical of, well, on that particular issue, how much time did I spend of the overall 6 hours that I billed a client for time for that on that particular day. If I did 8 items, then it's going to not only describe the 8 items, but have a breakdown of how many, 0.8 of an hour, 0.2, or whatever, that you can then add up and come to the 6-hour figure with an explanation. I hope I'm making myself clear.
One of the accusations that was made against me was that I didn't meet with the attorney. And the reason I didn't meet with the attorney was that she was going to bill us for meeting with her to question about the odds. My question to you is, if I have a question about your bill, are you going to bill us for me asking the question about your billing?
No, sir.
Because that's what the accusation was. That's one of the reasons why I didn't meet with the attorney questioning billing, because she was actually going to charge us to meet with it.
I wouldn't do that.
Are you going to be basically the attorney that we're going to be dealing with? We're not going to be dealing with 2 or 3 other attorneys?
The primary point of contact will be myself. You may recall, certainly you, because you were here, that when I did make the presentation, my firm did make a presentation to the commission 6, 8 months ago, however far back it was. I was joined by my partner, Stephen Zelkowitz, who also does government work. So from time to time, I do sometimes take a vacation or may have a scheduling conflict or something come up. Then the person 9 out of 10 times that you would see instead of me or potentially deal with would be Mr. Zelkowitz.
Okay. As far as emails are concerned, if residents send you emails, you're going to forward them over to the city manager and have the city manager respond to it, because the last attorney charged us for residents responding to them with emails.
Certainly, I believe that my personal and professional opinion is that the primary point of contact for residents is, in fact, your manager. He is the one under your charter that is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the village and village hall. So it is my personal and professional opinion that he should be or potentially she in the future, it should be the person, the primary point of contact. To the extent that a legal issue may be raised and the manager feels prudent that my input may be needed, then I would expect and coordinate with him a response. But the wholesale forwarding of emails to the attorney for the attorney to respond to, I don't believe is the appropriate way to do things, unless you all tell me differently.
Now, the last point. The last time you were here, and correct me if I'm wrong, if the commissioners emailed you and asked you about questions, you didn't bill us, because you said that.
No.
If I quoted you wrong, I'm just giving this a quote. You said that if I have to respond to an email right away, then of course I have to charge you. But with an email, I don't have to respond right away, so there will be no charge.
Yeah, the general rule and the way that our engagement was set up and the way that I've always practiced with my municipal clients is I encourage commissioners to contact me. I encourage staff members to contact me to voice any concerns or issues they may have that may be occurring, particularly to the extent that it may involve a legal issue. And that way I can provide and practice what I call preventative law. And so in order to encourage that kind of exchange of ideas and communications, I thought that the engagement letter between the village and Gray Robinson provided that we wouldn't charge, or they wouldn't charge for routine, what I call routine phone calls or routine communications. On the other hand, if a question is being asked that requires in-depth analysis and research, then we would bill for that research and that analysis to the extent that that became necessary. But the day-to-day, for example, the village clerk sends me an email saying, we received this public records request. FYI, I'm not going to bill you .1 to read that email. That's not how I practice law, and would not bill for that under the engagement letter and the arrangement we have with the village.
I'm satisfied in keeping your firm for as long as we need. What I like for this commission to do is take its time and do real research if we decide not to use this law firm and hiring our new attorney. Because I didn't know until I found out later on that there was a lot of complaints against Gray Robinson. That should have come out in our research. So I hope that this commission will take its time in finding the correct law firm, that we don't go through the problems that we went through before. Thank you.
Clerk, would you take a roll call on that?
Okay. Mayor Halpin,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Samaria,
Yes.
Thank you.
3-1-3-0.
Thank you. On 5B, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, for discussion? Yeah,
Motion for resolution.
we just 5B.
This is for the
For the manager, yeah, but we should have a discussion before we have it.
after the motion.
Okay.
If I may, maybe Mr. Hernandez is a little shy, but in the memo that's in the agenda packet, my understanding, and I certainly don't mean to speak out of line, so correct me if I'm wrong, any commissioner, is that Mr. Hernandez agreed to accept the position of interim village manager while wearing the same hat or continuing to wear the hat as your director of public works.
That's correct, yeah.
At the same salary. And then toward the end of the of the meeting last week, there was a discussion primarily by Commissioner Kennedy about, well, should some consideration be given to Mr. Hernandez to raise his compensation level because of wearing the two hats.
I believe that's going to be next month's agenda
No.
of his
All right.
salary,
I mean,
His worth.
it's whether or not you want to take that up now or continue, roll the item over. That was the purpose of putting the agenda item on for tonight. But it's the pleasure of the commission.
Okay, are we going to have a motion on
No,
5B?
are we going to have a discussion about this?
After the motion. I make a motion. I make a motion to approve the resolution for the appointment of interim manager David Hernandez.
I'll second that.
Okay, now we're open for discussion.
There is no resolution. If you want us to prepare a resolution, you already you all appointed already.
Right.
Mr. Hernandez as your interim manager. If you want to reconfirm that or ratify that tonight, it simply takes a motion. There is no resolution. The
Okay.
question is then, as part of that ratification of the action that you've already taken, do you want to potentially consider or discuss the issue of his compensation? If not, then all it is a motion to ratify his appointment.
I think then I'll make a motion to ratify his appointment. Looking for a second.
We'll still have I'll second it, but we'll still have a discussion about that,
Okay.
correct? Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Kennedy.
When I brought up David's pay, it was just in an interest of fairness. I mean,
Talk in the microphone.
he agreed to jump. When I brought up the issue of his pay, it was just to be completely fair to him. He left the audience and went up to the podium and accepted a new position and is going to be doing basically two jobs at one time. So I just thought, let's be fair to this guy and make sure we're taking good care of him while he does two jobs for us. I think what we might want to consider doing is, once we determine the process that we're going to roll out to find a permanent replacement, that at that point we'll have a better idea what the timeline will look like, and then we can insert kind of, okay, if we get to this point, then we'll need to consider giving David some more money. So I'm comfortable. He said he would take the job at the current pay right now. I think we need to have a conversation about what the plan is going to be to find a permanent replacement and figure out in that timeline where it makes sense, if we kind of exceed a certain point, that we start compensating him differently. Or allow him to come back to us and say, okay, guys, this is kind of getting out of control here, and I want to be able to, and David, I would like him to feel comfortable to come to us and say, I'm doing it for you, and it's getting to be a bit much, and there are some things we need to consider, whether that be taking care of him differently, his staff differently, but I think we can't really do that until we know how long the process is going to take. I was hoping we were also going to have that conversation tonight for both positions, for the attorney and for the village manager, kind of lay out the plan of how we're going to do that. Or does that happen at the next meeting? I thought we were coming here tonight to do that as well.
It's up to you to discuss it today or next meeting.
I think we need to have a plan in place and start rolling it out, because it involves ads being placed places and all those kind of things that take time.
Roseanne, how much time does that take to, we have to advertise, correct? For the,
Yes. Yeah, we can. Yes. On the Association of Managers of Miami-Dade or the Association Florida, we can advertise at the Florida League of Cities. There's few options.
For informational purposes, there are a couple of professional associations, as the clerk indicated, where generally that's where municipalities or counties will place
Advertise, yes.
notices for solicitations. The other way that some jurisdictions go is to engage a recruiting firm. You don't have to.
Very expensive.
Yeah, they can be expensive. They can be very expensive, and I've seen it done both ways, and I've seen qualified candidates respond to both processes, both at the attorney level and as well as the manager level.
We're very economical,
I know.
so we'll use our own.
So Jenny, I asked Roseanne for this document. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. This is the, I guess we'll call it the protocol that the village used last time we hired a manager, and I guess this is when Christian was hired for the position. Is that correct? Yeah. And in here is a background on the village, explanation of our government, job description, qualifications. It's all very clearly laid out in here, including a timeline for exactly with dates of when, deadlines and submission deadlines and how applicants would be reviewed and when they'd be presented to the committee or the commission rather. It's all very clearly explained in here. I think we need to have a separate conversation about this when we've all had a chance to consider whether we want to just roll this out again exactly as is. Do we need to look at I read through all of this over the weekend.
I never saw it.
Yeah, I read through. I asked her for it. I think I got it on Friday or Saturday maybe. I'm not sure. But it seems to be very well put together, but I think before we just say let's advertise the position, we should have a conversation about what it is exactly we're advertising and make sure we agree on that, because compensation is in here and everything.
Do you want to put that on the agenda for next month?
I think it should be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this should be like of utmost importance, and then the exact same thing for the village attorney, which I got as well. So we need to start the process, but before we can start the process, we have to all agree exactly what it is we're going to do.
Well, I think Commissioner Samari and I have to read it, so we'll get a copy.
Okay.
Well,
Commissioner
Okay,
Samari.
you didn't
Yeah.
get a copy either, right?
No, what I want to discuss is that I like to give this city manager at least, and if the commission agrees, to give him at least 20 days to 6 months to give him a chance to get his feet wet and see if he would want the job. If he decides that he would want the job, he can put in an application. But I had a conversation with the city manager a couple days ago that I think is important to discuss. I asked the city manager if he got the job, could he handle both positions? And his answer was yes, that he could. And I asked, okay, what is it going to cost us? And I like to have the city manager, in his own words, talk about the conversation that we had in reference to.
Well,
I think what I'm trying to get
I think that let me interject.
if he does a good enough job, maybe we don't need to go through the whole process of looking for somebody, because what he's offered us, I think, would be a good. So anyway,
Well, the conversation I had with the commissioner was that if we take just like, let's say, the base pay of our past city manager, the difference between my pay and the pay of the manager, I think it's much well compensated, but for two reasons. One, you're going to save money, and you're going to save a salary technically, but you're really only going to you're just going to have a buffer between the existing salary and then my salary, the difference. The rest the city's going to save. So that's the conversation I had with Mr. Commissioner. In other words, I think that I don't think it's fair for the city to pay double. I think it's crazy. But I think I could do both jobs, and I think I could save the city money by doing both jobs during the time that you guys make then, if anything, a decision. Because at the same time, what I'm saying is you have, for whatever reason, I'll just use a number. Let's say 9. I'm at 7. Well, the difference is 20. Well, the other 70 you're going to save. That was the conversation I basically had with the commissioner. You understand?
That's if we decide that we want to keep, or we think he's done a good enough time in the time frame that we're given, 120 days to 6 months. I think we should give him at least 6 months to see if he can handle the job, and if the commission's approve it, then we can do that other process that you want to do. I just think.
So are
having
you
a short time
suggesting
period-
that we give him that time period first and then possibly just offer him the job rather than do a search?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you want us to call the roll on the motion?
I'm sorry, Ginny, can I respond to that? I want to respectfully disagree with you, Dan. I think the village needs, I think we need to do a complete and thorough search for the best replacement for both of the positions, the attorney, and this is nothing against John or David. I just think we need to do our due diligence and find the very best person that we can find for the village attorney position and the village manager position. If we end up with both these guys in place, well, okay, then we end up there. But we know we went through the process properly in a very transparent way, and we're assured that we got the best applicant. We
No.
don't know who's out there.
But that's for next
But-
month's discussion.
Right, exactly.
We're only approving his interim
Understood.
appointment
I just want to respond to
now.
what
No,
Dan
I
said.
agree with you.
about that.
If you misunderstand, then I'm not saying not for us to go through the process. What I'm saying is let's give a time frame how long we're going to have.
That's next month's,
No,
we're
you
just
can't do both.
approving now his interim appointment
How long is this interim for?
till next month when we discuss it.
We're going to have the discussion March 3rd.
That's what we had
Let's
this
call the
meeting
roll.
for.
Go ahead, and then please go ahead and take the vote. And I want to make a comment about the attorney solicitation process. I find myself in an awkward situation, and one that I want to make sure that you all understand, and the public understands, and ultimately the Commission on Ethics understands about my involvement in putting together or assisting you all in putting together the whatever solicitation you want to for the attorney. The short answer is very limited if I'm going to respond to it, because there is some case law and some opinions out there that say that you can't put together the proposal that you're going to respond to.
Right,
So,
I understand that.
What I propose to do is that I will forward to the manager blind proposals that I can search online, or that he or direct him to search online of other attorney solicitation processes here in Florida, and then he can work on one that he thinks is best. And conversely, I'll do the same thing with the manager's one to the extent that that's the way you want to go after you discuss it next month.
That's great.
Okay, vote. Call the roll.
Can you repeat the motion, please, so we can have the
It's
right
just
words?
It's a motion to accept the interim appointment
Interim.
of David Hernandez.
Okay. Sorry, it is. Mayor Halpin,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Samaria,
Yes.
Thank you. John, would you like to do 5C on our resolution?
Yes,
For a
ma'am.
Special election, please?
The next item on the agenda is Resolution 2020-06. A resolution of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, calling a special election to fill vacancy of one commission seat, providing for polling locations, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. As you all know, under your charter, due to the resignation of Mayor Trutman, it's necessary for you all to call a special election based upon conversations between the clerk and the supervisor elections. The date that apparently works for everyone is
14th.
Tuesday, April 14th, 2020, that the supervisor elections can do it and complies with your charter. And that's what you have before you, is to approve that date and the polling location of precincts 151 and 177 at Ed Burke Recreation Center here in Biscayne Park.
Do we need a motion on that, or do we?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I make a motion to approve Resolution 2026-6, special elections for one seat.
I seconded 2020.06.
2020-06. Discussion? I have one question. I'm not sure who to ask. If we're going to approve this election and it will take place, if we're filling one seat, if we have only one candidate for that one seat, are we required to conduct the election, or is the election canceled at a certain point? And what is the cost that we incur? I see the cost is about $16,000 for the election. If we cancel the election, because if we're allowed to cancel the election because there is only one candidate,
no cost.
what are we charged? What are we charged exactly, or nothing at all?
Can I add? Okay, I went through this with the Department of Election on the previous election, special election. And when I finished the qualification date, if we have only one candidate, there is no cost for the Department of Election at this point, and we don't have election.
So if there's one candidate only, then there's no cost to the village at all. We'll save about $16,000. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay,
A second.
you want to pull the roll?
Okay.
There was a second.
Okay.
There was a
She
second.
second.
We did second.
Yeah.
In favor?
Mayor Halpin,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Samaria,
Yes.
Okay, 5D is the special magistrate. And we'd like to have a discussion on ordinance 219-05. Commissioner Kennedy, would you like to,
She's not here.
John, you're going to talk first?
She's not here.
No, you all asked for this item to be placed on the agenda for discussion
For this-
purposes. We're just as staff seeking direction, presumptively, that you all want to amend, revise, repeal,
Accept.
or accept as is ordinance 2019-05.
Or any changes that you want, or any changes.
Okay, if we decide that we want to recall this, what's the process that we have to do?
What do you mean recall?
Well, what I mean, if we don't want to accept this,
We want to read.
All you need to do
I
is
wanna
pass a
reverse.
motion that you don't need, that you don't want to.
No.
It's an ordinance.
If you want to go back to exactly the way things were before,
Right.
then we would have to process an ordinance
You would.
to do that.
With
If
you.
you want something in between, because there was
Same
some
thing.
discussion about that, it's going to require an ordinance one way or the other, which will require two readings, one of them a mandatory public hearing.
We're starting all over again.
Okay.
If we were to do that, we'd be starting all over.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dan. I'll let you finish.
See, I don't think that we've had a problem. One of the things that we had is when John Hearn was around and we had a problem, that's when he showed up. My question is to the attorney, if a person comes up that is going to have a complaint in front of the board, is there a way that we can find out if they're going to have an attorney present? Then we can have an attorney present. That's number one. Number two, isn't it possible that our attorney should be able to look through the agenda item that's coming up and say, okay, do we need an attorney present or we don't?
Yeah, I mean, you some jurisdictions actually write into the code enforcement ordinance or any other ordinance saying if the violator is going to engage the services of an attorney, they have to provide advance notice to the village, so the village has an opportunity, or whatever the jurisdiction may be, so their attorney can also be present. Certainly can go through the agenda with the code enforcement staff to determine if there are any problem cases that may require the attorney's attendance, or work with staff to properly prepare and work up the case. There are a number of different ways to deal with those types of cases. I think I said at the last meeting that in all defense, I am a special magistrate in 2 other jurisdictions in Broward County. And in one of those, they also have a code board, and staff determines which cases are going to go to the special magistrate, which cases are going to go to the code board, and sometimes it falls along the lines of, well, this is a more complex case, so we're going to send this to the special magistrate.
Hasn't that always been our commission to decide if something was difficult and refer it back? Not the commission, I'm sorry. The board.
The code board.
No.
The code board.
Well, if you're going to ask something, they need to go to the. Explain who he is.
One of the questions that I have for you is, we don't need to have an attorney president or these things, because I think our code boards have done a pretty good enough job that if any problems came up, you as an attorney would tell us that there's a problem and then we need to have it.
The state statute on which your code enforcement regulations are based on say that your attorney, me, or someone from my firm, whoever that might be, is either the attorney to the code board, or case may be the special magistrate, or as to staff and assisting staff in the prosecution of the case. Can't be both, because of an inherent conflict of interest that the Florida legislature said can't be that way.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The local government attorney is either legal counsel to the code enforcement board, if you have a code enforcement board, or essentially serves as the prosecutor. Okay, can't do both. Okay, a magistrate has to be someone from outside the general, outside the village, and not associated with my law firm, because that.
So you and no one from your firm can act as our magistrate.
That is correct.
Understood.
But couldn't the code board would be representing the village anyway, so then you could still.
No, the code board is nominally an impartial decision maker that hears the evidence presented to them by the code enforcement officer and the respondent and anyone else who may give testimony, and then based upon that, whatever they hear during that particular case, they determine whether or not a code violation has occurred or not.
Could we have the code board does it, and we can bring in a magistrate when in a special case that we need to have? I really want to go back to yes, we can. I think we can have a code board, and then we can't.
You can have both. The state statute allows for a municipality to have a code board and a special magistrate.
But see,
it also allows for one or the other to the exclusion. It's your decision.
I think we've been having this code board doing I don't know how many years, at least 12 years since I've been here, and I don't see a problem on why we need to have a magistrate. I like to hear from the chairperson, former chairperson. I just don't think we need a magistrate. I think the code board has been doing a pretty good job. Okay. Just for reasons, the reason why this code board and the magistrate was brought up was because 3 of the past commissioners, had a problem with the chairperson of the code board, which was Gary. Same thing with Parks and Parkway. So that's when they came up with the idea that they wanted to get rid of both boards. That's the only reason that came up.
Okay. As a point of information, best I can recall, in 7 years that I've been on the board, we've had an attorney come in 4 times, and we requested a 5th time, but the attorney didn't show up. It's just not on, or it's...
There you go.
Oh, okay. Just to eliminate some apparent confusion, it's an attorney or a magistrate. Okay, you don't want to have a code board and have a magistrate, or maybe you do, but the magistrate doesn't act with the code board. That's a separate entity. They act alone. So if you have a magistrate and a code board, they're independent actions, different cases, okay? They can't consult with the code board. 95% or more of our cases are routine, mundane, same stuff. Sometimes we have some more interesting issues, and very, very rarely do I think we had cases where we really felt that there might be legal ramifications or interpretations that we were competent to handle. I think the attorney made a very good suggestion, is that the one modification, if you elect to go back to the code board and the code board alone, would be to include in that anybody coming to the board with an attorney would have to notify the board. And the question was asked of me, and I didn't think of that at the time, that they could write a letter, but putting it in the ordinance is even better. That way we can prepare for it. And in those cases, we do want an attorney there. All right. Is there any other questions I can answer?
No.
Nope.
Okay. So we now have an existing ordinance that we can either keep or change completely or change somewhat. We're at a crossroads here, and it sounds like we're considering all kinds of things. Some questions for me, please. John, why do some cities choose a board versus a magistrate and both? What are they trying to accomplish by saying we're a board city, we're a magistrate city, or we have both?
Very good question. My experiences have been municipalities or counties that want to be a kinder, gentler, more local community tend to favor the code enforcement board, because it is the residents who know the community, who know in some instances the alleged violators, and take into all of those considerations of being part of the community into the process and the decision-making process. Although ultimately, as I said before, the code board should be basing their decision on what they hear at the code board hearing. It is quasi-judicial nature, and can be appealed in accordance with the statute and the code. Communities that favor special magistrates tend to take the position that they would prefer an outsider, someone, to use the cliche, someone that doesn't have a dog in the fight, to hear the cases and act and rule impartially. I know in another municipality where I do work, we bring in a special magistrate actually from the other side of the state, who has no connection to the community, and to some degree that decision is purposeful. Communities that use both want the benefit of both of those systems, depending sometimes upon the nature of the code case. And I think, as I understand in reading through your current regulation, that may have been the intent. Although, as I said, in the jurisdiction where I am personally very familiar with the two process, because I serve as the special magistrate there, it is staff. There's nothing in the code that dictates that a particular type of case goes to the code board versus another type of case that goes to the special magistrate. The idea is that staff has the common sense and flexibility to decide which go to to what entity or
Okay.
what form.
So in our current version, it is clearly delineated.
Correct.
Well, it may not be perfectly clear because I was a little confused reading it, but they made an attempt to try to separate. So you're saying that would not be required. We could have both and not have it separated at all and allow staff to determine that.
Correct.
And staff would be the code officer, the village manager.
Village manager.
Would the code board have any say in that? Like, this is something we don't want to see, send that one to
No,
the magistrate?
the
So
code
someone,
manager-
before it gets there, someone
Yeah,
determines
the-
that?
the code-
Okay.
The code board should, in my personal opinion, my advice is, shouldn't be in that, you shouldn't put them in that position.
Okay.
It's tough enough for the job that they have
Understood.
as it is.
So cities that go with a magistrate, might they also have more commercial property? Might it be a matter that some of it's commercial and they're kind of big ticket things and
Yeah.
they're corporations they're dealing with as opposed to residents?
I will tell you that I'll give you a real life experience. The most complex case that I ever have had to deal with as a special magistrate involved an attempt by the city that I do that work for, their ultimate successful attempts to shut down their last two adult entertainment businesses in their community. And we had multiple hearings, both sides represented by attorneys that went for several hours. In fact, one of the hearings we specially set just for them because we knew it would take long. And I ended up, as a special magistrate, having to draft a 12-page order dealing with constitutional issues. That is unique to that municipality because they had an adult entertainment establishment. They had a commercial property. You all don't. Again, it's ultimately a judgment call to some degree as to, whether or not you want to go with one, the other, or a combination of both. And to the extent that it's a combination of both, who do you give the responsibility for making that determination? You can provide some general guidelines to the managers to which ones may get sent to the special magistrate, so he has at least some minimum guidance. Which
So
is
the
a good idea.
the village manager would make that determination? then?
Correct, based upon some basic criteria that
That
you
were
give
agreed
to him,
upon in
and you
advance.
delegate that authority
It
to
could
him.
be the amount of a fine. It could be the nature of the violation. It
Correct.
could- Okay. So that's interesting to me. So here's another, I'm always trying to think like what's the best possible outcome in a situation and what's the worst case scenario that we could have to deal with. Right now we have the situation where all the members of the board resigned at basically the same time. And hopefully that doesn't happen very often, and that was a kind of a special situation. But the fact remains is that the board did resign. So, and we have nothing right now. Could we have an ordinance that had them both in there that was written to, you're the attorney, that would be written such that it made it very clear that we do have both, but we're all about the board. It goes to the board with very few exceptions, and one of them would be if there isn't a board for some reason, while we get that board filled again, everything goes to the magistrate. And we're not paying a magistrate unless we call her or him in and say, we need you here next Thursday to conduct a hearing, right? I mean, we ratify them, and then they're basically on call. Can we find one that isn't expected to be used the first Thursday of every month or whatever it is? I'm just trying to cover us here. My feeling is I want the board, and I want to also make sure that we're covered all the time. And a magistrate might actually fill in some gaps. It might be some very specific things.
Let me ask. Have you dealt with any municipalities as small as ours,
Yes.
besides us?
Yes.
And do they have a magistrate, or do they just have their?
One of the municipality started out with a special magistrate from day one. They decided to go special magistrate.
They were wealthier than us?
Yes,
are
they
you
are.
talking about
Yeah,
Indian
yes,
Creek,
they,
or
yeah, yes, they
where are we talking about?
And I understand the issue of the cost involved.
Okay.
Look, I'm. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm not getting rich off of doing special magistrate services for the 2 municipalities I do it for. I'm aware of this community being sensitive to your finances. The other municipality that is similar in size, maybe a little bit larger, and again, to some
No
degree,
commercial.
wealthier. And no, in that regard, I think Biscayne Bay is unique in my experience, my knowledge of communities that are, except for a couple others that there's a little small community in Broward County called Briny Breeze, I think it is, or Palm Beach County.
Oh, that's the Briny Breeze is
Yeah.
the mobile home.
Yeah,
part.
so it's all residential. But you are unique. You fall in a very small category
Right.
of that. But to your question, the second municipality that I'm familiar with, they initially said, we want a code board. And they used a code board to the exclusion of a special magistrate until about 7 months ago, when they said, we're going to go to a special magistrate. I don't know if they kept the code board, but they did modify their regulations to call for a special magistrate, and they did engage a special magistrate to hear their code cases.
I just think that our board worked, and I didn't see any problem with it. And unfortunately, them resigning was because they were very offended finding out through the back door about a magistrate coming in. So they were not respected at all. And I don't know if we want to open that up to see if anybody disagrees.
I think Commissioner Samaria's point earlier in his comment is, if you tell us what you want. I mean, that's as staff, that's what we're here to do. If you want to roll back what you currently have to the way it was before, we can do so. I think that I've, as best as I can, based upon my own personal experiences and professional experiences, you have a fairly large picture of how both systems work and how they can coexist or not. It's up to you. So you tell us what you want to do.
I like to make a motion. I want to bring the ordinance back to the way it was before. Have just the code board, and we can always have, like I said, our attorneys can be there too. If we need to have it, our attorney can show up. I just think that it wasn't broken. We don't need to fix it, and I'm all for saving money. And this is going to cost us money. Oh, I need a motion. Right.
Second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I would like to add one thing to that. The point of me asking all those questions was that's the fact that we are here at this time looking at this, and it's an opportunity to understand it and try to look at everything. I agree that we should go back completely solely to a code board. But I do like John's suggestion about adding something in there about the board being advised when attorney is attending with a resident, and the former board chair is here now saying that would actually help him do a better job if he knew that and could call in resources. So,
will you accept that in your
No,
motion?
I've had that. That's what I said from the beginning. That's what
Okay.
we needed to do.
okay, so if you'll amend your motion, I'm all
can
on
you,
board with that.
attorney? Can you
You're
help
allowed
me
to
to
do that,
amend
I
this
don't know.
motion on exactly what I want to say?
Well, let me ask this question before you make your motion.
Okay.
Is there anything in the existing ordinance, the current one that you have, that's in your packet today, is there anything in there that you all like?
No.
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 Okay. Because, well,
I took care of that.
The reason why I say that is on in your packet, on page 11 of 21 of the ordinance, just for edification purposes, there's section 14.1.8. And there's a lot of strikeout, and then there's a lot of addition. Looking at this very briefly, there are, for example, subsection A, the new subsection A that starts at the top of page 12 of 21 of the ordinance. It says, upon request, the code inspector at such other times as may be necessary, the special magistrate or chair of the code compliance board may call a code enforcement hearing. That's it, with the exception of potentially removing the special magistrate language. That's pretty much parrots the language in Chapter 162 Florida statutes, which is the code enforcement statute that gives you the authority to have a code board. It lays out conduct of the hearing. It talks in that statute about how a hearing is called. So it's
How is it in our old one?
It says right here, the chairman of the Code Compliance Board may call hearings of the board, and hearings may also be called by written notice signed by at least 3 members of the Code Compliance Board.
Or it's strike.
And that was
The part
stricken
that's
out.
stricken out.
Right.
The statute says that it's the responsibility of the code compliance officer to call for a hearing. And the theory or the reasoning behind that is, no disrespect to the chair or any of the code board members, because I know that, I've heard you, is why would they be calling for a hearing if there wasn't a code case? It's kind of chicken before the egg type of argument. The code compliance officer is the one that knows that a case is pending in a code board meeting needs to be scheduled.
But they're all included in that, if I'm reading this correctly. It says the code inspector or the magistrate, we're not going to do that, or the chair may call a code enforcement. It's saying,
So if
in the new version, it's saying that the code, it's saying Christina or Gary could call for a hearing, is what it says.
You are absolutely correct. The old language doesn't have for the language of the code inspector calling for a hearing.
Only the board.
Only the board.
Can I ask Gary your opinion of that?
No, it says, conduct of a hearing, subsection A, the chairman of the Code Compliance Board may call hearings of the board, and hearings may also be called by written notice signed by at least three members of the Code Compliance Board, period. It doesn't, it makes no mention of the inspector. I'm sorry. I appreciate all your comments, but we need to go to the microphone in order to be able to pick them up.
So, John, are you saying you read through all of what was stricken and what was added, and you're saying that we might want to consider going with A as a replacement to the original A?
Correct, with the removal of the reference to the special magistrate.
Get the magistrate. Okay.
So I don't.
I read that and didn't even catch it, but he's absolutely right.
What I get what you all want me to do with this ordinance. What I would suggest is I take a rewrite, place it on the next agenda, and explain to you why, if something was left from this ordinance 2019-05, the reason why, because in all likelihood, it's going to be because that is what Chapter 162 says.
Okay, if I can just add, we're hoping that at the next meeting will be the second reading of Ordinance 2020-1, which will allow the board to be enacted again with some of the members, and I'm hoping we're going to have applications at the next meeting where they can sign in. Now, is that going to prevent the board from being reinstated next meeting?
No, ma'am. No.
Okay,
And
then
in
I have no
fact,
problem with that.
Until you all make the changes that you want to this particular ordinance.
This would happen later anyway.
My understanding is you don't want any matters moving forward to the code board until the ordinance is rewritten.
Okay, I want to hear you say something again that I think I understood. You're saying that the way that A is rewritten, excuse me, is more in line with what the state, at the state level, what they're saying there as well.
That is correct.
So this was actually kind of a nice correction to kind of get us in
Correct.
line. Okay, then I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I
For
make,
those two changes.
make my motion again? Attorney, I can use your help on making this correct motion.
The motion would be to amend ordinance 2019-05 to remove the references to special magistrate and the separation of cases that's in.
I think the language might be just to revert back to the old version.
Wouldn't it be
well,
just adding that to the old one? No?
No, it'll be.
Can I take a crack at it?
And then
Excuse
we
me, I'm
will-
sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the motion is to amend ordinance 2019-05 to remove the references to the special magistrate and the split of jurisdictional authority.
To go back to the old board.
And go back to solely a code board.
Right.
Consistent with Chapter 162 Florida statutes.
Okay, that's my motion.
I'm not certain that really says what you want to say, because there are a lot of other things that were changed in here. I think the motion should be something like, and I'm not making a motion, I'm saying if I were going to make a motion, it would sound something like, I make a motion that we replace ordinance 2019-05 with the ordinance that existed prior to it with the two following changes. One, use section 14.1.8A, and also add a section regarding resident attending with an attorney must notify the village in writing 1 week prior, so the board can be prepared. So I think you need to specifically say, go back and get the old, trash this one, go back and get the old one, completely use it with two specific changes, and that's it.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you don't, you're picking up all kinds of stuff in here that you don't want.
Okay. Commissioner Kennedy, I make the motion that you just said.
You
That's
amend the motion.
I amend the motion, just exactly what you said, because that said it.
Can I still
You can make a motion and I make the motion.
Self-explanatory. So I make a motion to whatever Commissioner Kennedy said.
We will roll back the ordinance to the prior
The
version.
prior one.
And just add those two
Add those two sections.
things.
Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, can we take a vote?
Mayor Halpin, there's
Oh, I'm sorry. Can it?
not allowing?
No,
I don't even know who she is.
She's a resident.
Well, I was
Okay,
going
hold
to
on.
ask.
There is no public hearing for this.
No, there's no public hearing.
There is no public, unless you want to
No.
comment. You don't have to.
No.
It's not required.
Okay.
Take a
And
roll call.
You can, every resident, to the extent that residents have questions or comments, we will have that at the next meeting, on first reading. And then, hold on, I'm sorry. If you want to have a voice vote, that's the motion on the
Go
table.
ahead. Call the roll.
Okay. Mayor Halpin,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Samaria.
Yes.
So the motion is to repeal ordinance 2019-05 and rewrite the.
Go back to the original with the two added.
Changes.
Change the special master.
I'm
Code-
sure,
and code
Roseanne, that our attorney will help you on the wording of
code
that,
officer.
since it got confusing.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm sure he will. Okay, the next is ordinance 2020-1. And Commissioner Kennedy, you put that on the agenda. Go ahead.
I did, and we discussed this at the last meeting, and it's a real simple change that I'm recommending we make to the ordinance regarding the appointment of members of boards or committees. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot here by making people sit out 1 full year if they resign a board for any reason. And I'm recommending that we remove that one sentence from the ordinance. make that quick change, do a first reading here tonight, second reading in March, and it's done. And but I want to make clear that it does not mean that someone who resigns from a board and reapplies is automatically reappointed to the board. They're reapplying
Right,
to be on the
fill
board.
out a form.
They're
Do you want to
reapplying
make
be
that
on
in a
the board.
motion?
Well,
No, no, no,
before,
hold on. Before we start, let me read the ordinance title.
Okay.
Okay. Ordinance number 2020-01, an ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, amending Article 2 of Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances, Village of Biscayne Park, entitled Commissions, Boards, and Committees by amending Section 2-30D3 regarding the one-year restriction on the eligibility of appointment of members of boards or committees that have resigned, providing for inclusion in the code and scrivener's errors, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. So at some point before you take up the motion, you have to open up public hearing.
yes.
Okay, does anybody want to say anything about that?
Hi, Rox Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. Having been on the commission that approved the way the law reads today, I couldn't tell you standing right here why we had that 1 year. It might have been carried over from years prior. But one thing that one of the commissions I sat on did do, and I regret that we did it, is at that time we had a more congenial group, and we got away from each commissioner appointing their own person to the boards, and rather we basically just accepted all the applications that were put in and made sure that we didn't turn anyone away, and we put people on the boards. As the commission became a little more acrimonious in recent years, effectively what happened was that the boards were sort of stacked, and the minority on the commission also became minority or non-existent on those board appointments because the majority was controlling who got on. So while you're addressing Section 2-30 D, which is striking that 1 year period, if you go up 2 paragraphs to 2-30B, I think you can take an opportunity to broaden the range of views that are represented on those boards and committees by reverting to the 2010 version of that section, which allows each commissioner to make their own appointments to the board. And in the event that a seat remains empty, I suggest that in the event a seat remains empty for a period you determine, 60, 80 days, whatever it is, then the rest of the commission can pick up that appointment and make sure that the boards have enough members in order to make quorum and to do the business that they're supposed to set out to do. But the 1 year definitely should come off. And I suggest to you, because this extra change that I'm bringing would change the title of the ordinance, you may need another first reading. But this ordinance and the one that you were just discussing could travel together because they partner to the end that you want to reach is reinstating the Code Compliance Board.
But if we add that means that we will not be able to form the board next month, which will be the second reading. If we change it, we have to have...
Correct. But even if you form the board will not be able to hear a case until you have the second reading of that magistrate ordinance.
So we have a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Logistics, yeah. You may as well, you're going through the expense of it, fix the 2 little pieces, and then we'll all be off to smooth sailing. Thank you.
I wholeheartedly concur with those additional changes, i.e. each commissioner elected by the people of Biscayne Park have the opportunity to appoint a board member to each of our boards, unless in the case of certain boards that have greater than 5 members and there's at-large appointments. I argued against the change, whatever it was, 5-6 years ago, but having one commissioner, one appointment is the fair way to do it. It's the best representation of the people who vote for those commissioners. I would also say that I'm not sure how the current situation is, but when there's a new election and a new commission, those commissioners that are possibly replacing someone or filling a vacancy should have the opportunity to appoint their board member. So whomever was appointed by the exiting commissioner should have an that commissioner should have an opportunity to fill that vacancy. And I'm not quite sure whether the language addresses that at this point in time. So, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Gage Hartung, 1029 Northeast 114th. I'm going to first say I agree with the ordinance as far as removing the 1 year. I like to call it the volunteer penalty. You volunteer and you get penalized because you can't go up to another board or another commission until, and then you have to stay off. As far as the proposal that was just spoken about, I have to disagree with it. As a long-term board member, I've, in the past, when I was up for renomination, my commissioner might not have run or might have decided not to be on the board or commission anymore. And you kind of turn yourself into having to hunt around for a commissioner to support you. So I think in a way it negates qualified people from being on the board and turns them into having to, go around and, like I said, you have to find somebody to beg to reappoint you to the board. As far as the point making that the commissioners have a right to appoint commissioners or board members, they do have the right to do that, and it's not, they're not taking away that right if they can't just appoint the one person that they want. So I wholeheartedly agree with keeping the ordinance the way it is on that.
Thank you.
I'm not quite sure I understood what Gage said, but I think each commission member should appoint board members. I agree. I think that's the fairest way. And I would be in jeopardy as well as Gage would have been.
Barbara Kuehl, 111th Street. I've actually been on both sides of this because I sat out as an alternate for 2 years because I had a commission that refused to appoint me. So it can work both ways. The one thing, though, is that when a commissioner has to appoint a board member, it makes the commissioner become more involved with the community. It makes them look for people that they can appoint and kind of get to know who has strengths in different areas and talk to them and know why they would be good on the board. Because as a longtime board member, we have people who apply, who get put on the board just because their name was in the batch, and they don't even know what the board is about. So this way it puts a little of the responsibility on the commissioners to find the best suited people and somebody who represents the way they feel. Thank you.
Will you indulge me for one more comment? The issue of
yes.
Is that yes? The issue of alternates to boards. As a board chairman for 20-some years, wasn't quite sure. Well, it's not really clear what happens with a what's the subject I'm talking about? Alternate. Thank you, everybody.
Showing age.
When they fill in and so forth. It's not clear. And when you're talking about the sunshine law and so forth, when you're talking about this issue of having alternates, how are alternates going to be appointed? That's at large. Now we have an at-large appointment situation. Later on, if we have one commissioner, one member, how will we appoint alternates? And then how does that work if you have a vacancy on the board and you want to consider the alternate going up? Personally, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, you shouldn't have alternates. You have 5 people on a board. They're supposed to come. If they don't come, you boot them off. And replace them. It's not slow. And just do it.
I heard that, Barbara.
David Raymond. I had asked before about the why the 1 year prohibition was in there, and Rock said she didn't know. So I don't know if anybody else here knows why. No. Okay. So I don't know why that came up in the first place. But in terms of the appointment by the commissioners, I guess I understand what Barbara was saying, because I've been on both sides of this as well, because I've been asked to be on boards because I show up here and I know people up here because I'm on the other side here. I've been asked to be on maybe more boards than I've said yes to be on, and I think that that's kind of good and bad. I think that the hard part is if you're going to do this, there are a lot of really talented people in the village who maybe don't show up at the commission meetings and you all don't know, who might be wonderful board members, but you don't know them, and so you're going to kind of maybe come to the pool of people, and I'm not saying this to insult you, whoever is on the commission, you know who you know, and if you don't know the other people, you don't know them, and you're not going to know who's out there who might be a wonderful board member for some of these boards. So I just think that's something to consider. And I think the other thing is, if you are going to do this, that maybe you sort of figure out when you're going to do it, because I know the boards come up for renewal, whatever month, February, March. So if you're going to do this now, this hearing, you're going to back this ordinance is going to get backed up now for 2 more months, right? Because you're going to have this won't even count tonight. You're going to have to do another first reading, another second reading. You're in April, so then you're in May. So everybody who's applied for March is going to wait or get on, and then you're going to kick them all off, and then you're going to have an election in November. So just a lot of moving parts for people who are volunteering to help the village. I'm not sure that what you really gain from that. And I think it also sort of makes it very political for people who want to just help out. Anyway.
Hi, my name is Yesenia Gonzalez. I live at 11800 Northeast 11th Avenue. I'm actually on the foundation board, and I just wanted to back up what was just said. I've actually been, and I'm sorry because I don't remember the name of the board, the parks, and I call it the tree board, and I agree with what they were saying. I think I myself am someone that want to help in the city, but I necessarily don't know all of you. Like you said, you don't know me, and I don't know you either. And I feel that I'm more than willing and have been able to help in the best way I can for the city. So to have the positions be appointed by individuals that might not know me necessarily, I think disqualifies, like they said previously, people within the city that are willing to help that necessarily don't have time to come to every one of these meetings. And that's all I have to share.
Thank you.
Hi, Gage Hartung again. So brings up a point too of the fact that you do have people. We have a problem with people volunteering in the village, and qualified people might be passed up because they might not be. They know somebody on the commission. The other thing too that caught my attention was some of the board positions have terms on it. So does that mean somebody that's appointed that's been re-upped for 4 years on their board, or 3 years or 2 years, whatever it is, come the next commission, they're going to be booted off? So are the terms not in effect on that? So there's some consideration on that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we responding now? Are we going to have a conversation about it now?
Yeah. You have to close the public hearing.
Okay, public hearing is closed.
There's no one. Presumably there's no one else.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Okay, that was very interesting, because some of those things I had thought about before, and some, quite frankly, I didn't. And I see both sides of the issue of appointments versus at-large elections among the commissioners. And now as a commissioner, I see it a little bit differently again, because now I ostensibly will want my voice heard on a board where I make an appointment. And I would want to find someone who I not only think is qualified and engaged and will show up, but will align with what I believe that board should be working on. But they're not necessarily beholden to me, but ideally I would want someone on Parks and Parkways who thinks plants are good. You know, and someone on P&Z who says, yes, we should enforce code. You know, so I see both sides of it. Here's where now my wheels are turning because I heard all of that, and I like a lot of what I heard. I think, personally right now, I would like to move to appointments rather than at large. It does bring up a problem about when you would make this effective. David brings up a really good point. We have an election coming up, and we could possibly be appointing people in March who would then all get replaced in November after an election. Not ideal, not an ideal way to start. The alternates and the at-large thing, and I'm not really sure why we have alternates either, quite frankly. I agree with Dan on that. Because if you're not showing up, then let's get someone else on the board. And if the person I appointed to Parks and Parkways doesn't show up, shame on me. I guess I need to do a better job finding a good candidate to get on the board who will work at it, you know? So I think a lot of this puts the onus on us to go out there and search out the best candidates as opposed to see what comes up here and vote on them and hope that they're okay. I'm trying really hard to engage with residents and try to get some new people here. There's a gentleman here tonight who came to his first commission meeting because I got him to come, trying to get more people engaged. I think it's our responsibility to reach out to this community and meet people and pull new people in. And that's not saying anything negative about the people who are engaged all the time. We need more, and we need new voices and new perspectives and new opinions, and we need diversity in thought. I think that would benefit us. So, go ahead.
A good board, I mean, they shouldn't have to run around and try to become our friend to get reappointed when they're good at their job. I mean, that's really a responsibility of us.
That's one way you could look at it, but I think I'd look at it, I'm dumping the responsibility on me. They shouldn't have to search me out and try to become my friend so they can get on a board. I should be out there trying to find the right kind of people as well and meeting more people.
I'm talking about existing ones.
Yeah. So I think maybe, let me look at my notes here. I think we might want to have a separate conversation about this. We might want to just vote on this tonight, take care of the business at hand, which is get that 1 year thing off of this ordinance, get a first reading done, get a second reading done in March. I was told to stop pounding on the table after the last meeting because I didn't know it reverberates through the room. And get it pushed through, and then have this other conversation possibly to be effective after the election and try to at a better timing for it. I want to get this part done, and while I agree with some of this, I think maybe it could wait a minute. I know it's going to cost money because we're doing it again, but I don't want to slow the process down. I want to get the most important thing done, which is allow people to get back on the code board if they want to. So I agree with a lot of what you guys said, all sides of it, really. And I'm here right now thinking I can't maneuver through this and try to figure out the best thing right now, tonight, and I think we need to pass this now. That's my opinion.
No, I agree with you, and I do have a concern because you brought up something that makes a lot of sense. If we're going to, I do want to have where commissioners are responsible picking boards. When I first got on a recreation board, I was Commissioner Cooper's selection, and I met with him to find out what he wanted me to do as his representative. I got to make my final decision, but there was a relationship with commissioners. I think since we got off having a commissioner pick a commissioner, commissioners have not been involved in going to board meetings and seeing what the board is doing. So I do like to get that. But a concern I have is if we do this and move this over into April, I think we should do this part first. I do agree. How are we going to do if the board members are picked in March and the next election is in April? Are we going to then get rid of?
There's not going to be a perfect way to do it. It's going to, yeah.
Yeah. How are we going to solve that? The person that got selected in March is.
And the other thing is, as a commissioner, I have to say the first thing I would look at, I just got elected in a special election, so I'm not supposed to be sitting here, in the normal course of things. But I don't want to give an example, but there is a board that had someone appointed to it by a specific commissioner, and I kind of felt that was my person on that board when I got elected, and I reached out to that person. And I would, if as someone who was just elected at a special election, the first thing I would do is go meet my appointments on every board to see if they were not the right person already, and I wouldn't have to go much further.
Yeah, because then that.
So I would go to Parks and Parkways and say, okay, Barbara was, I replaced Jenny, and Jenny appointed Barbara. I'm going to go sit down and have a cup of coffee with Barbara and see if, you know what? Yep, I'm just going to keep Barbara on the board. You have that option. You don't have to go find someone else. You have the option of keeping your person on the board.
And I think that makes sense because it does remind us you wasn't elected. You're replacing somebody else just temporarily.
Yeah.
So that would solve that problem. But I do definitely want to have it where each commissioner responds. The only thing with alternates, the only reason I would have an alternate if, let's say, God forbid, a board member is sick and he cannot be there.
You still have a quorum. If one of us is
what
sick,
happens
one
if
of
we
us
don't
is not here tonight, and
No, but
we're
I understand.
functioning.
But what happens if we don't have a quorum? How do we solve that?
Do you want to make a motion on that to pass this?
Is it motion time?
Yes, it is. It is motion time on the ordinance as to if you want to move forward with
As it is.
As it is.
Okay.
As it is.
And then
Okay.
after you take a vote on that, which has to be a roll call vote, then you can discuss an additional ordinance and anything else that is related to this or that was discussed, so staff knows where they need to head.
Okay. May I make the motion?
Yes,
This is
since
mine?
it's your agenda.
And I'm also going to say before I make the motion that the motion is going to be to keep it as is. And I would like to table the rest of this conversation. I think it's an extremely valuable conversation, and we need to move on and not do this month. And we'll look at this for a future date. So I make a motion that we accept the first reading of ordinance number 2020-01 regarding the amending section 230D3 regarding the one-year restriction of the eligibility appointment of board members.
Question, just as a
No,
question.
Not yet.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Discussion?
Yeah, discussion. My only question is, would that give the opportunity of the old board, code board, would be able to put their new applications even though they resigned? That would include this, right?
Not until second reading. That's what this
Not
is
until
about.
next
that's
month.
not the question.
Right,
I'm
not
asking,
till next month.
I'm asking about this language. Basically says that they can come back. That's all I'm asking.
That's exactly what
Okay.
it is.
Yes.
Okay. Then
On second reading.
after second reading, no, I understand that. I just want to be sure that I understood what the ordinance was.
You want to
Okay.
do the roll call?
Okay. Mayor Hopping?
Yes.
Sorry. Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Samaria?
Yes.
Okay, now comes the other one. Charter Review, Advisory Committee, final report to the Commission. Commissioner Kennedy, would you like to take care of that?
Yes. Roseanne, am I allowed to discuss what you and I had a conversation about before the meeting started?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
So I want to give this really serious consideration, and I know there's a timeliness associated with it to get it on the ballot. We have a board that was appointed, and from what I understand, they did a real bang-up job at this. Now, I know there are people who sort of question some things about the board. The bottom line is, these residents were asked to come serve. They served. They put in the hours. They put in extra hours and extra meetings, and they did exactly what this village asked them to do, and we need to give them complete, serious consideration of everything that they're suggesting that we do in here. Here's my issue. I read this, and I attended two of the meetings, part of the meetings. I read minutes. I tried to keep up as best as I could. And I read this, and there are things in here that I, read and go, I don't agree with that. But somehow it got suggested in here, this group of 7 residents, somehow among them, thought that it was important enough to put in there. I don't know the why behind the what they did. So they may say the mayor should be directly elected. And I think, no, the mayor should not. But I don't know why these 7 people got to that point, and I think I deserve to know. I think that part of what they did deserves to be heard here, and I would like to know that, because I don't want to just make a decision, think, well, I don't think we should do that. I want to hear the why behind it. I asked for the board chair, Judith Gersten, to attend this meeting or a representative of the board to be at this meeting to explain the why behind the what. And unfortunately, Judith, who indicated to Roseanne that she would like to attend, but she was unable to attend tonight.
She's sick.
She's sick.
Yeah. She's
And another
very-
board member is here, and I don't know if it's appropriate to have
Yes.
him speak to explain the why
Yes.
behind the what when he wasn't asked to do that officially by the board. I don't know what's appropriate here. All I'm saying is I would like to hear that, and Judith indicated that she would like to come and have that discussion with us, which I think is very generous for her to come here and, look, we need to do this the right way. I think that's the right way to do this, and that's how I would like it to be done. I would like to table this to the next meeting and have Judith Gersten be here with whatever board members she wants to have with her or by herself to fully explain how they came to these decisions. These are really important things. This is our charter. This is our Constitution. This is what we live by, and they're recommending 3 very specific things that they felt very strongly about and a whole bunch of other notes on other things that they're saying we might want to consider as well. I have my own opinions about all of that and some other things, but these people did their job, and I'd like Judith to be here to have that conversation. I think she deserves us to be able to do that with her.
No, I don't. No. I like to hear from Dan Keys, but just to give my opinion, I went to all the code board meetings. I take that back. One I missed because I was going to be serving.
Charter meetings, charter.
Charter review. I only missed one meeting, and that was the meeting that the village was going to serve me to sue me. Anyway, so I didn't show up to that one. But I went to all the charter review board meetings. The motive of the chairperson was not sincere. The motive of the chairperson was put there by the mayor. I like to hear from Dan Keys on what he thought of the whole idea. I don't think the charter needs to be fixed right now. These 3 proposals that they're making, we don't need to change it.
I think I probably might agree with you on that, but the work was done. I think these are residents who did a lot of work for this village, and I think we need to seriously consider it. And whatever someone thinks someone's motives may have been to be placed on the board, or how, I'm looking at this. They did a lot of work, and I want to do this the right way. And I would like Judith, who offered to come here but couldn't tonight because she's ill, I would like her to be able to stand here and answer the questions and present how her board came to this. That's all. We may end up right where my brain thinks it is right now, but I think we need to do the process best.
Madam Clerk, isn't there a time frame that we have to do this that has to be done by a certain?
No.
We have a certain amount of time that this has to be done
to get on this year's
Get on there, but it
ballot.
doesn't have to be on this year's ballot. It can be next year's ballot or the following year's ballot. Can we hear from Dan Keys?
I'll make my statements incrementally. There isn't a charter review board currently. When the commission got this, the board was sunsetted. Okay, I believe that I could represent both sides of the issue, and I don't have a problem with Ms. Gerstein coming back and countering or giving more information. I have indicated to the entire commission that I believe there are things that were legally based in the opinion of the 2 attorneys that happen to sit, one of which is Ms. Gerstein, on the board, that were legal issues, okay? And they brought up case law and what have you, and state statute as things. It was just the opinion of some people regarding the 4-year term and the election of the mayor. And we went around the table, and people gave their opinions, and so forth. So, I mean, bottom line, it's going to come at, some people felt that was a good idea. Some people didn't feel, one person felt that it wasn't a good idea. And that's what many of the issues were there. Frankly, I never personally got a good explanation from anybody regarding the election of mayor situation. They seem to want the opportunity. They seem to be complaining about the current situation, but then they wanted the opportunity to elect the mayor. So it didn't make sense to me. Anyway, if another member of the board is given the opportunity to speak, I would also like the opportunity to speak and give the other side of the coin. Thank you.
Well, I think at that point, then there'd be public comment. Everybody, I mean, if we do it, if we push it to March, everybody would have the opportunity to get up and say what they think about it anyway.
I have no problem hearing from the other board, because I want to hear their answers too, but I think that we should table this for the 2020 election and just put it off into the 2022 election.
Well, I'm not certain we need to do that. I think we could just table it to March and have the conversation and see where it ends up. We may agree to move forward with nothing, in which case it doesn't matter. You could say 2050. It doesn't matter. It's just if it goes nowhere, it goes nowhere. I think we just need to do the next step, which is this.
If you move this over to the next one, you got to have first reading, second reading, third reading. But it has to be done by June. This has to. If you're going to put it on this,
July 31st.
Excuse me.
July,
it has
end
to
of
be
July.
July.
We
right.
can still do it. Roseanne, we could still do it, right? If we push this to March and moved along quickly, we could still get it done if we chose to.
Suppose we as a commission want to change everything that's on here. We're not going to have time to do this. You're not going to have time to do it. You're going to basically going to say we're going to accept. Either we do this, that means we're going to have to accept what they vote, or we're not going to do it. I mean, if there's changes that we want to make,
Have the meeting and see where it goes.
I agree with you, Commissioner Kennedy, that we can table that for discussion at the March meeting.
And can we make sure the invitation is extended to Judith to come here and have this conversation with us? And people, of course, will have public comment.
Okay.
And so that you don't end up in a situation where you don't have a legal opinion on another legal opinion. Can we ask this attorney to
Yes, that was the next thing I was
communicate
going
with
to.
those two people
You're stealing
to
my
find
thunder.
out what they were, and so he has an answer.
You're stealing my thunder. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to ask John Herron is, are you completely comfortable weighing in on the legalities of these things if we push this? I mean, if we did it tonight or if we push it to March now, will you at that point be completely comfortable? And if the folks from Gray Robinson, it was Rebecca Rodriguez who attended all those meetings, would be willing to share some of the why from her point of view, because they offered to help us in this transition, could you reach out to them and see what she could provide that backs up some of the reasons why of this, if you think that's appropriate?
Yeah, certainly, and I have no problems doing that. I mean, I've looked at the proposed amendments as set forth in the memo, and just at first blush, I don't see any legal issues with what's in here, frankly. But I will check to see if there was a proposed change or a change that is reflected in this memo that is driven by a particular legal issue.
That's a great idea.
That may have come up.
Make sure we don't have to pay her for her.
Yeah, I will
since
say
she's been
this.
paid already.
On that topic, I want to say one other thing. I attend most commission meetings. I did when I was a resident, and I still attend most as a commissioner so far. And I don't recall during the conversation about this Charter Review Advisory Board, I don't recall anyone ever approving the attorney to attend all these meetings, and
it wasn't.
I'd love to know how that happened in the first place, because I went to a meeting and Rebecca was there. I'm like, I don't recall the commission saying we want the attorney there at these meetings at the rate of $250 an hour. Or
To
whatever
answer
she
your
charged.
question, the mayor gave instructions to Judith to ask the attorney to be there. Judith invited the attorney to come.
Well,
That's when it happened.
okay, if you say that's the case, okay, but I don't know if is a board allowed to invite the attorney to attend the meeting and charges $250. We spent a lot of money on this, so I want to know what Rebecca did to earn it, quite frankly.
Okay, you want to make a motion to table that?
I make a motion that we table the
Charter Review Advisory Board?
Charter Review Advisory Board's final report to the commission to the March meeting, and that the village, I'm getting better at this, that the village manager instruct the clerk to invite Judith Gersten to attend.
And Dan Keyes.
And any member of the board and the general public will all be here and can all chime in, but specifically invite the board chair, Judith Gersten, to come in so she can have a conversation with us about the why behind the what.
Motion.
You got that, huh,
You got
Roseanne?
a second? Yes, this time I got it. Do we got a second?
I second.
Okay. And then, so we're basically saying that in March, we can decide whether or not we're going to table this item after that. Okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
I have no problem with that.
Is there a consensus?
Yes. That's good.
Yes.
Yes.
We call that kicking the can down the street.
I would just like to say one thing before we adjourn, that we are very fortunate in Biscayne Park to have our resident photographer here. And he's a photographer by trade, and it's nice when he volunteers, and he's the one responsible for the pictures in Village Hall that he takes gratis of us, even if he gets rid of all the wrinkles, takes all the weight off. He does a great job of fixing it.
He fixed my
So I want to thank Harvey Bilt for being our resident photographer and taking care of that.
Thank you, Harvey.
Is there any other business? Is there any other business that we want to discuss?
We're not allowed to discuss things for the March, because,
Not
no, it's a
now.
special meeting, right?
No.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I think
Meeting
we did better,
adjourned.
didn't we,
No,
folks?
motion. Make a motion.
No?
We need a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye, aye, aye. Thank you for coming, everybody.